Welcome to episode 9 of Drafts with Jordan and Josh. Jordan had a 1 week off, had some vacation. We are back. It's good to be back, man. How you doing?
I'm great, buddy. I definitely need to apologize to our faithful listeners out there. I'm sorry about that, guys. I was off the grid, up in the mountains.
Literally off the grid.
Literally off the grid, but I'm back down the hill a little bit, and I'm really excited, Josh. I mean, I had a great couple days off there, up in the mountains, and just excited to be back down here, and we got to watch some film together the other day, which was awesome, and then now we get to talk about those guys. So excited, man.
Yeah, Jordan was literally itching to get back to football. He can't handle more than about 2 hours away from football. So
it was rough. It was rough.
We're both happy to get back at it. Some house cleaning first, Jordan. PFF Elite raffle. Of course, we're doing that again.
We have two winners, Josh.
We have two winners to announce.
Two winners
to announce. At the Berg 37, you're a big winner. You win a $200 subscription to PFF Elite. Woohoo! At Vice_the_legend, you are also a winner.
Woohoo! That's awesome.
Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, $200 stat package there, the PFF Elite package. That's awesome. Now you guys can also open up your preseason draft guides and follow along with Josh and I, which is awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, Josh, and then we also got, you and I are constantly looking at our draft guide, and we're constantly referencing it on the show. And people who have already subscribed to either PFF Edge or PFF Elite already have it, and they've been listening to us and going over it as well. But there's this new promotion now, Josh. There's a way for people to get it for even cheaper than $39.95. Do you want to tell the people about this?
Yeah, I can do that. We have partnered up with the good folks at both FanDuel and DraftKings. And if you sign up for either FanDuel or DraftKings, make a $10 initial deposit, you get PFF Edge for free. Is that right?
Jeez, that's like a life hack. So it's normally like $39. It's normally $39.95 to get this thing. And then if you just sign up and make a $10 deposit to either FanDuel or DraftKings, you get it for free.
Which, let's be honest, that's a complete no-brainer because Seriously? You sign up for those sites to play daily fantasy to win money. And what better way to help you win money than to have PFF Edge? So essentially, you're just making a deposit that you're going to get a return on that investment anyway because you have a PFF Edge and you're going to win every week. So that's a no-brainer.
Seriously, I can't believe this. Okay, that's amazing. All right, everybody.
Simple economics, Jordan. Simple economics.
It is. And I'm not even good with economics, but this is simple. So you guys all know what to do. Go sign up and make that $10 deposit and join the PFF Edge party. All right, Josh, we are going to be moving on now to some of the players that we're going to be seeing coming up. Man, it's getting close to the season, bud. I'm excited.
I know.
I can feel it. I can almost feel the non-congealing paint in Canton, Ohio coming up soon. That's when we know football's upon us.
Is it ready yet?
So yeah, really excited about that. So now we've been going over these different position groups, and then now we're going to go to the linebackers, and excited about that. And turn to page 120 in your preseason draft guide if you're following along. That's where we're going to start off, Josh. Why don't you all these reports that we're going to be talking about and all this data we're going to be talking about is all in the preseason draft guide. So definitely, like I said, follow along with us. Yeah, Josh, why don't you tell us more about the linebackers and what's sort of making them a more difficult evaluation every year?
Yeah, obviously the linebacker position has really changed, and we're seeing it quite a bit, especially this past year with the talent that came out for the draft. And we're going to talk a little bit later about the Lions, but General Manager Bob Quinn had an interesting quote they're going to talk about a little bit later, but is going to apply right now to the linebacker class as well. He said this past year, linebacker is a position that normally you don't have a large number of them on your draftable board just because in college football, a lot of linebackers are undersized. They're playing at 215 to 220 pounds. He then discussed the changing nature of linebackers, how it's a position that's really evolving, and that there are a few legit linebacker prospects now. Several of the linebacker spots around the NFL are manned by converted safeties, and we're seeing that more and more. There are a bunch of them this year coming out. Obviously, you've got guys like Dan Buchanan, Landon Collins, safeties in college. Collins can do a little bit of everything, but certainly guys that really.
Cravens.
Yep, Sua Cravens is another one. He played linebacker last year. They're kicking him back to safety in Washington. Obviously, that was the big debate with Jabril Peppers from Michigan, who's now with Cleveland, just signed yesterday. So that's a big theme, is that we no longer have that standard 43 Sam Will Mike linebacker. Really, majority of the time, and we see as we've gone through these team reviews, more and more of them are saying 70-80% of the time they're in nickel packages, which means maybe that extra defender is either a nickel corner or one of those safeties coming down into more of that linebacker role. So with that said, let's get into it. Our first guy we want to look at, Jordan, is from The Ohio State University, Jerome Baker. Tell us a little bit about him and some of the stuff we have on him so far.
Well, yeah, the Jerome fits into that class, and we're going to be talking about this every time we talk about linebackers, because there's going to be a clear delineation between these guys who can stay on the field for all three downs, or guys that we think that can cover. And Jerome Baker is one of those guys that can do it. I mean, he can play against the run, and he can still, has good range and coverage. He can also be used as a blitzer too. So I mean, he can be used in all these different areas. But again, going back to the size, I think he's playing in the 220 pounds, in that area. So, not a real big guy, but again, can do all the, be the sort of 3-tool player that they're looking for, right now. I mean, I know you got to see a lot of him last year. What's your take on Baker?
Yeah, I did. And when you think about a traditional linebacker, especially inside, he really doesn't fit that at all. I question his instincts at times. I don't think he's super quick to read and react at times, which is a little bit frustrating with him, considering how tremendous an athlete he is. A bigger point to that is his ability against blockers. Certainly the size comes into play there, where he really struggles to take them on, but he also doesn't see them coming. He tends to let them get on top of him, and that kind of hints toward there being instinct issues as well. So bottom line, I think he can improve in those areas. Not sure I want him as a Mike linebacker, but let's see what he does in his second year as a starter at Ohio State.
No, I totally agree. We keep going back to we keep having, these guys have a full year to improve upon things. But, I mean, he's already shown that he can be an effective pass rusher, Josh. I mean, just looking at his pass rush numbers, I mean, his pass rush productivity of 28.89 ranks sixth, among the linebackers in this class. He had 4 sacks, 3 hits, and 9 hurries last year, which is really impressive.
Yep, and I think that's something that is one of the good things that we're going to see 2 years worth on him, because I don't think with the way that defense is currently structured that he's just going to consistently get a lot of reps, simply because they don't necessarily need to be bringing him from all over the place. I mean, they have 3 of the top 10 edge guys in the country, essentially, already on that team. So it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to be bringing their 3-tool linebacker on the blitzes. I'd want to see him in coverage where you can use his range. He does a good job of sticking with tight ends and even receivers in the slots. Another area where he really excels at is tackling. Uniform tackler. He missed only 6 of his 78 attempts last year. Real impressive in that respect as well. So I think has a very high ceiling. Again, I want to see how he does on an instinct-wise. I think if we're talking about the modern linebackers, we probably need to get away from being so worried about ability to take on blocks. That's just not as big an issue. We want to see how also he handles kind of taking over that defense, presumably, because that was certainly Raekwon McMillan's job last year. And one of the reasons he was picked probably a little bit higher than his athleticism that he showed on the field really warranted. But his ability to get the defense in the right looks, make pre-snap adjustments and all that. Presumably Baker is going to be one of the guys to take over that role for that defense. So that's going to be a big piece of his game this year as well.
Yeah, he and clearly at this point we have him listed as our top linebacker prospect for the draft, and so definitely a guy to keep an eye on this year. But Josh, we don't stop there with our Big Ten linebackers. We have another one from your area here. If you want to go ahead and move on and talk about him,
we do. Jack Cichy from Wisconsin. Some injury issues last year, both really the last 2 years. His reps have been limited for a variety of reasons. He's another guy, not quite the level of athleticism that Baker has, but enough to play from the middle as a linebacker, even though he's only 233 pounds. It's interesting, Jordan. I remember when I started doing the scouting, anytime we had a linebacker under 245, we immediately said, "Oh, undersized. Needs to bulk up.
Yep.
Needs to bulk up." Now, Jack Cichy is 6'2", 233. We're like, yeah, that's about right. so in 8-9 years, that's how much the league has changed. But he does an outstanding job in the run game, can really fly to the ball, can beat blockers to his spot and finish plays off. He had the 7th lowest percentage of negatively graded plays against the run last year.
Wow.
And he just has a really good feel for avoiding those second-level blocks, which is something we just talked about Jerome Baker struggling with. Also, you see him on the other aspects. 6 career pass breakups on only 25 targets. Also been extremely effective on blitzes as well. 9 sacks, 7 hits, 12 hurries on just 115 career rushes. So outstanding pass rusher these 2 years. Let's see him play an entire year. I'm excited to see what he can do, Jordan.
Yeah, he was a fun guy to watch, and he's a senior, so I imagine he'll probably be one of the guys that we see down in Mobile as well. And you mentioned, we do think he has some third down ability. You mentioned what he can do in coverage. You when we were watching him, you already pointed out he can effectively sort of drop and play underneath zones. So we think that like the blitzing numbers that you just mentioned, plus his coverage ability means that he probably can be a third down linebacker, and so therefore should be in consideration for going before day 3. And then, yeah, Josh, I don't know. You got a lot of good linebackers to watch out there this year. All right, we'll move on to, again, there's always an Alabama guy. As I say, there's always, we'll always be talking about front 7 Alabama guys. So, there's always an Alabama linebacker, and this year's no exception with Alabama's Shaun Dion Hamilton. Another senior again. I imagine another guy we'll probably be seeing in Mobile, Josh. This guy, 233 pounds. So he's, again, on the what would have been the lighter side 5 years ago. It's now on the heavier side. But again, a lot of playing experience last year. Keeps the ball in front of him in coverage, and he can really smack people who are coming on underneath throws. He had the 17th highest percentage of positive graded plays against the run in the draft class, so he's really stout against the run. And then he also had the 11th lowest percentage of negatively graded plays against the run, so he's pretty effective as a run defender. But as we know, Josh, it's only one piece of the puzzle now for linebackers.
Yeah, he's got to be able to do it all. But I worry a little bit about his speed in coverage. You talked about his ability to keep everything in front of him, and I think as working with underneath routes, I think he's capable of doing that. He's a guy that's not real flashy on film, Jordan. When I look at him, I don't see any real big impact plays. He's the guy that just gets in the right position and finishes a play off, but not a guy that we saw that's consistently blowing plays up in the backfield. But then again, at Alabama, he wasn't the guy they had to do that because he had someone else for that last year. So it'll be interesting to watch his development as well in that respect. Only 788 career snaps for him so far, so should be getting full-time production for him finally this year, and we'll get a real good look at him.
Yeah, because he played next to Reuben Foster last year, right, in that defense?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
yes, he certainly did.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely got to aid you when you're playing next to an amazing defensive player like that. So yeah, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how he does without Foster there, without getting to play next to a stud like that, and then without and can he improve in other areas outside of just the run defense. But again, another solid player there at Alabama, as per usual. All right, the next player that we need to talk about, Josh, is Louisville's Stacy Thomas. Louisville's Stacy Thomas. Tell us about Stacy Thomas, Josh.
First thing I see when I look at him, and we're going back to the weight thing, is he's got a big ass, which means, which sounds funny and like I'm mocking him, but that's a real legitimate scouting thing that teams are looking for.
He's legitimate.
Basically, what we're saying is, well, yes, exactly. He's 6'1", so he's a little squatty, about 240, but he's a guy that you definitely expect at the next level can sit in, anchor, take on, and shed blockers. I think that's definitely something he can handle. But, he's got a little bit all-around game to him. He had 4 pass breakups last year, which is tied for 11th in the country. Forced an incompletion on 16.7% of his targets. That's second best among draft-eligible linebackers for this year.
That's impressive for still being that big, of what's now considered big, because he'd probably be one of the heaviest linebackers in the draft class at this point, I would think.
Yeah.
So it's still, again, as you mentioned, we would tick the junk in the trunk box for this guy, and he's still able to move around in coverage, which is impressive. And then, you go back to his run stuff too. I mean, he's got his run stop percentage of 12.5 is 8th in the draft class among linebackers. So again, strong against the run. Can still move against the pass. There hasn't been a ton of pass rush production there, but I think a lot of that's probably scheme based. But I think you said he had 4 pass breakups and also an interception last year, so pretty good year for him in coverage. We said that as far as areas to improve, he did miss 11 of his 84 tackles opportunities, so that's something he'll definitely need to clean up. But there's some good linebackers out there in that conference, including the next one that we need to talk about. Is a pretty intriguing player, and that's Tremaine Edmunds from Virginia Tech. Josh, why don't you start us off with Tremaine Edmunds? He was physically again sort of a really intriguing player.
Yeah, I have to say, of the guys we looked at, and we probably looked at around 10 guys to kind of talk about this week. We're only going to discuss 5. But to me, he was the most intriguing one in terms of maybe not necessarily the best player right now, but he might have the highest ceiling, 6'5", 236. And especially compared to the rest of the class, he just looks huge.
Yeah.
But he still has, in addition to that size and length, the length's a big deal for him, and I think he can use it pretty well. He still has the speed. He has a huge tackle radius. He can work downhill in zone coverage. He can play sideline to sideline against the run. I think there's a lot to like about him in those respects. Just a one-year starter, missed a lot of tackles last year, missed 14 of his 107 attempts, so he's got to clean that up. But, Jordan, how about his pass rushing ability? He showed that quite a bit last year. You got to get excited about that.
Yeah, he's, like you mentioned, like his build, like instantly sort of stood out to us because he's so tall and, just so long. He had really long arms. Like he, honestly, like physically, when you think about it, like as far as an NFL comp, he kind of reminds you of KJ Wright, don't you think? As far as physically, like
yeah, that's fair.
Those really long arms and he could blitz, but he almost looked more comfortable like rushing off the edge and using those, long arms and that length and that ability. Last year he had 6 sacks and 5 hits and 14 hurries and 1 batted pass. So, again, pretty impressive for an off the ball linebacker. Again, I think that he, and I think you agree, Josh, that he might be a little bit out of position there at Mike. Like that didn't really seem like where you best want to use him, right? Am I right? I mean, like,
Yeah, and Virginia Tech's had some interesting stuff with that the last couple of years. He's not the only front 7 guy they've had kind of playing out of position.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, remember they had the defensive tackle that was about 240 pounds the year before. But, he'll be an interesting eval going forward. I want to see him do it in another year. He barely played in 2015. But I want to see how he does this year. Does he have that complete game? Because I think when you look at everyone else, assuming he tests well athletically, and he certainly looks like he will, we talked about the length and the benefits of that. he could end up being possibly the top guy from this group. Wouldn't surprise me, just because he's going to offer the versatility and with the ability to rush the passer. If teams consider him an edge guy, that's certainly going to put him above the rest of the class. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and again in that length, which, as we know, these teams, they keep mentioning it. Every team mentions it, so it's very valuable to them. So yeah, I agree, and he's going to be a guy who, again, he's so unique. I think that a lot of teams are going to view him, possibly differently, and so he's, I think teams are really going to have a plan for him. But yeah, he's a really interesting guy to watch, and a guy that I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing this year. Hopefully, we each have some Virginia Tech games to do, so we could watch this guy. All right, Josh, that's going to wrap it up for the linebackers. We picked 5 to sort of highlight. Again, there's a bunch more listed in the preseason draft guide. And then now, Josh, I think it's time for us to go inside the war room. This week, we're going to talk about a team you know a little bit about, Josh. That's the Detroit Lions, since we're staying in the North. Again, it was fun to watch these pressers and to see the differences in how each team is set up, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But Bob Quinn handled all the Lions draft pressers, and I got to say, Josh, in my own personal opinion, you can reflect on this as someone who's observed the Lions front office for years, but I really think the Lions are in good hands with Bob Quinn, Josh. It's just my opinion from seeing what I've seen there, and some of the people they have also working there. It's I think that front office is definitely headed in a good direction. But yeah, Bob Quinn, he's got some pretty cool philosophies too. He believes in drafting a quarterback like every year or two. He thinks that's good business, which I thought was interesting. And then there's a bunch of other things. Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit, about the Lions and their front office?
Yeah, on Bob Quinn, I kind of think when you look at the tree of Belichick, I kind of like the direction that Bob Quinn brings, because there's been obviously quite a few that have gone elsewhere and failed, whether it be at the general managerial level, whether it be at the coaching level. And it seems like so many of them have tried to forcefully make their stamp, and it hasn't really worked out. And that's not at all how Quinn has come in with Detroit. I think he's kind of been able to sit back and see how things have worked, see what hasn't worked elsewhere, and kind of take the best pieces of the Patriot way and try and instill them in Detroit. Obviously, the most interesting move they made last year was retaining head coach Caldwell. And that's going to be one of the more intriguing stories, I think, throughout this season, is because there are a lot of people that kind of think he's, in the last year of his contract, he might be a bit of a lame duck. And they're going to have to do something more than what they've done in the past. They're going to have to win a playoff game, win that division, et cetera.
So do you think they would go outside the Lions then if they got rid of Caldwell? Do you think they would go outside that staff?
Yeah, I think they would. Logic says, they would go with one of the potential Patriot candidates, and I think there's 3 of them. If you think about the 2 coordinators currently there, if you think about defensive coordinator in Houston,
Vrabel.
Vrabel would also be a potential option. Obviously, those are guys that have ties to Bob Quinn, so maybe he looks elsewhere, but it wouldn't surprise me to see something like that happen. Also, who knows? Maybe they only win 7-8 games this year, but the offense looks really good. They could stay inside and look to elevate Jim Bob Cooter, who's been really well received since he took over the year prior. So that'll be something interesting to watch for. But let's move on. Talk a little bit about how they handled the draft and their philosophy and all that stuff. Some of the key points, and this we'll kind of touch on some general things before we get into what they actually did. Some more things about linebackers we're talking about. Again, with the changing role of linebackers, Quinn says, we're in our sub defense 70% of the time. 3 linebackers, really only 10 to 15 snaps per game. So that kind of tells you where their mindset is with that. Now, obviously, they took a linebacker in the first round. One of the things Quinn said is instincts can't be judged in an interview. Instincts can't be judged in a test. Instincts are viewed on film. So, which is absolutely true. And that's something that obviously, for all we do at PFF, there's no metric for instincts. That's not something that's really quantifiable. So that's something when we watch film, we have to kind of watch for. We talked about that a little bit with what we saw from the Ohio State kid, the prospect of this year, Jerome Baker. And obviously he's referencing his 2 linebacker picks he made this year. One other key point in general that Quinn made is that last year they took a lot of high character captains. He thought that was really important. That was something they looked for, and they asked scouts to go find those guys that were leaders of that team. And I think that was a really important point for them to hammer home, because while they certainly have talent at a wide variety of spots, they haven't had like a true identity or face of either side. Obviously, the offense has Matt Stafford, but he's never really been the vocal leader type. The defense certainly didn't have that kind of guy, but I think they might have found that guy who, at least in a leadership and tangible standpoint, is going to take the mantle for that. You want to talk about their first round pick a little bit, Jared Davis?
Well, actually, before we even do that, there was just some other things that really stood out as far as,
Sure.
you mentioned the linebackers, because this is our linebacker episode, but Quinn mentioned that they only, use 3 linebackers 10 to 15 snaps per game.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was really interesting when he said, he said 15 years ago, you might only have a base defense and a nickel, and that's it. And he said, nowadays we have 6, 7, 8 different personnel groupings we use on defense. And then, when you and I were talking about this and about their philosophies and things like that, and, they say they basically assess value by down. They'll basically say, okay, how many downs can this guy play? Even on 4th down, can he only play gunner? Can he play other positions? Can he play in nickel? Can he play in dime? Can he play in these different, they said 6, 7, 8 different personnel groupings? How many of these personnel groupings can he play in, and how many downs? And that's kind of how they assign value. And you said you think that probably comes from the Patriots?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of that. You look at what the Patriots have consistently done in defense. They have a wide variety of guys that may not be complete superstars, but they excel in 1 or 2 roles. And so for Detroit now, it's a matter of identifying guys like that have, what they do best, and exploiting them, putting them in positions to really succeed. One of the interesting guys on the current roster to look at going forward will be second-year safety. He's listed as safety, Miles Killebrew. He's going to be, to me, probably that hybrid guy that he's listed as a safety. They've gone out of the way to claim he's a safety, but the reality is he's going to be that extra guy probably in the box in a lot of these nickel packages where maybe it's a mid-yardage situation, so they want to defend against the run, but they need to get some more speed on the field, some hitting ability on the back end. That's probably going to be Killebrew's role. Obviously, they have Tavon Wilson who can cover that as well, but you're going to see with those guys in the box quite a bit, playing more of that linebacker role that we kind of talked about.
So then, when we go to their first round pick and Davis, where do you see Davis fitting in with them then?
Yeah, I think day one he's going to have the green helmet. He's going to be that Mike linebacker. I think he has the athleticism to play all 3 downs, so you're going to see him regardless. Obviously, he's a rookie. He's got a lot to digest, but all signs point to him being able to handle the mental aspects of being able to call that defense out. So we'll see what direction that goes. But I think he's going to be that one guy that's going to be in there on virtually every play for them.
And if you look at some of the quotes that they had from them, it's really backing up what they had said before, some of their general philosophies. I mean, Terrell Austin said that Davis can work sideline to sideline and be a 3-down linebacker. So, he's got that aspect of it. They said that he's very well-rounded. And then Bob Quinn said, even mentioned, he said, as a freshman, Davis was a special teams player of the year for Florida when he was a backup linebacker. So he's got 4-down value. So, you have again, as far as there's allotting all this value, I imagine Davis had to end up being really high, on their board because, he does have a little bit bigger size than a lot of these college linebackers, plus that 4-down ability. So again, imagine very good pick for them and something that they're probably really excited about.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to point out too, that while we like Davis, we had another linebacker or two at that point in the draft that we probably valued a little bit more. But I think those intangibles, the leadership, the ability to coordinate the defense, to be that team captain, I think that weighed really heavily with him in particular. So it'll be interesting to watch him and some of the other linebacker prospects that went after him. They're going to be the traditional inside backer, because I don't know that he is as skilled as some of the other guys in some particular football areas, but it's the pre-snap stuff. It's the locker room stuff that really kind of put Jared Davis over the top for them.
Yeah, and they, I totally agree with that, because they mentioned their character stuff. So, like you mentioned, there's a lot of stuff I think that factored into it, and I think it's a really good pick for them. It's going to end up being a sound pick. They went back to Florida with their next pick in the cornerback and Tease Tabor, and he's a guy that I think they were really high on him, and then when it had his timed runs and he ran a lot slower than they expected, they basically had to go back and watch the film again. Bob Quinn said that he thinks that he probably watched more film on Tabor than any other prospect he'd ever remember watching film on, because he ran so slow and that didn't really match up with the film. He said, he didn't really see anybody running by him, and things like that. And he had some really good quotes too about corner instincts and things like that, and things that they look for in a corner that's not necessarily just speed. What are some of the other things they liked about Tabor there, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's a key point right there. The anticipation, the instincts, the route recognition, all those things really as a corner take precedent over the actual speed. You look at guys like Richard Sherman isn't super fast, Josh Norman isn't super fast, but they're physical guys, very instinctual players, and they're playing at the top of the league right now without being sub 4.4 guys. And so I'm not saying Tease Tabor is going to play on that level. The reality is he's in a good situation, probably doesn't have to be producing at that level because Detroit already has a really solid number one in Darius Slay. But I think when you put all that together, all those different pieces, I think his playing speed, forget his time speed, his playing speed matches up with the other guys. One other point I want to make with him too on this, when the workout doesn't match what you see on film, even from an athletic standpoint, you have to wonder, okay, is this a preparation area? Is there something in that respect that there's an issue? Maybe that's part of the issue, but I think the fact that they took Jared Davis first, and then who of course is also from Florida, and then took Tabor in the second round, I think that's very telling, because you know damn well that they most likely made sure Jared Davis signed off on Tease Tabor, just because he was the guy who was in the locker room for him. He was one of his leaders at Florida, so he obviously would have firsthand knowledge of what kind of player he was on the practice field, in the locker room, and all that. So I think even if you look at the preparation standpoint, there has to be a little bit of a degree of comfort that they were willing to take Tabor after taking Jared Davis in the first round too. I don't think that's a point that a lot of people are going to make on that.
That's interesting. The quote that Bob Quinn made about Tabor and about playing corner in general, I thought was really interesting too. I thought it was pretty funny actually. He said, as a corner, you have to be confident. We all kind of know that, but he said, he said you got the best athletes in the world running towards you, and you're running backwards. So you better have some confidence in your ability. And I was like, man, that's totally true. I can't even. That would be terrifying to be out there on an island as a cornerback. Man. And so moving on to some of those receivers running towards the corners, the Lions drafted Kenny Galladay, big wide receiver. And that's one of the reasons why they took him, Josh. I think they really, valued his size more than anything else, that I can think of. What do you think they liked about Galladay?
I'll be honest. This pick really confounds me, because especially when we talked about some of the things we just did, he's kind of the antithesis of that. He's a big guy. has big hands. You think he can be that big possession receiver, but he wasn't a guy that consistently got separation. He certainly didn't show the low 4.5 speed that he showed at the combine. He didn't show that on film consistently. Like I said, he was a guy that kind of struggled against physical coverage. I don't think he was tremendous on contested balls. Those are kind of the types of things that if they want him to be the big go-to possession receiver, that he's going to have to do for them. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of starts in the slot for him. Quinn talked about primarily he thinks they will start him out in the outside. He's got some unique route running skills for a big guy. I'm not sure on that so far at this stage. I think at this point he's probably a guy that they're going to find out they want to keep him away from defensive backs off the line of scrimmage. They want to give him a little bit of space to operate. So I'll be interested to see what they have to say. But they kind of all talked about wanting to play him on the outside, and that's certainly what Detroit needs. So we'll see. I have a feeling this might be a bit of a redshirt year for him, Jordan. I'm not certain he's ready to contribute right away. Stafford talked about him as a red zone threat ability, and I think maybe that's when we're going to see him. We'll see him in those wide packages in the red zone as potentially a jump ball guy. So we'll see if he can at least fill that capacity early on for them.
Yeah, and I think that he might. And I think that's probably what they're looking for. Historically speaking, and it's something that we'll go back to a lot. Historically speaking, the wide receiver's position is one that's very difficult for players to, transition from college to pro and have success right away. I mean, it does happen, but there's a lot to learn, especially if you're drafted by the Patriots. Good luck. But yeah, so it's red zone ability, and then there's a really interesting quote from Jim Bob Cooter on the value of a big wide receiver like that, and he said, facing a lot of talented corners in this league, sometimes those guys are able to cover even the best receivers really tightly. So to have a little more surface area to throw that ball, a little more extension that a taller guy can get to is valuable. And so again, I think that's why they took this guy, Josh. I think that he's going to be the red zone weapon. Eventually, whether it's this year or next year. I think that's what really stood out to them. They took him. After that, Josh, they double dipped at linebacker with Jalen Reeves-Maybin from Tennessee. Again, probably more of a guy we would view as a traditional will, but I don't know how many will snaps he's going to get, in the defense there. But again, I think it's a guy that they viewed as someone who could be a special teams guy too. What did you think they liked about Maybin?
Yeah, certainly his speed and athleticism he showed before he got hurt at very early on last year, missed most of last season. They talked about liking his instincts and how Quinn actually met with him personally before the pro day. So they felt at that point the value was too good to pass up. We don't have it listed as one of the quotes, but I believe they kind of had a much higher grade on him than where they took him, and feel that he probably would have been a second round pick had he been able to play all of last season. You talked about him being more of a will, and I think part of it is he's not a super physical guy. I don't think he's a guy you want working in tight areas, taking out blocks consistently. So my feeling on him is they can max him out. Maybe they can get a little bit of production from him in coverage, maybe a little bit as a blitzer eventually. But as far as where he fits best, that outside linebacker, when they do go into those more traditional sets, he'll be kind of that run and chase guy.
The next guy they took is a big and physical guy, and that's Michael Roberts, tight end from Toledo. Another red zone threat. I think he's a red zone threat that could be able to translate to the NFL successfully faster than Galladay, in my opinion.
No question.
Again, they like his physical tools. They think that they can move him around and use him a lot of different ways. He can be an inline guy or kind of move outside. Josh, how do you think they're going to end up using him in that offense?
Yeah, I think when you think about Ebron already being there, they got to figure out what to do with Ebron in terms of contract-wise. I think this frees them up to really move Ebron around as a chess piece he needs to be. I think Roberts, when they want an inline tight end, it's going to be Roberts on the field in that capacity. Significantly better blocker. Even at this early stage with him coming in for his rookie year, I can't see Ebron ever being close to the level Roberts is at even right now. So that's going to help the running game quite a bit. Also this year too, with that left tackle out, their number one pick from last year, out for probably at least half the year. The kind of expectation is that he might go on the IR with designation to return. So we don't know if he's even going to be able to play this year, Taylor Decker. That probably means that you're going to see a lot more chips, a lot more tight ends hanging in. So being able to have a guy like Roberts, who should be competent in that respect, can possibly stay in while you have Ebron still able to go out in routes and not being forced to do something that, quite frankly, he hasn't been good at. I think that's going to help all around because it's going to be giving that offense another very much more consistent playmaker on that. And again, that Patriot way, putting guys in position to succeed. And I think this helps Ebron as much as anything else, even though I imagine on the surface, the mainstream is going to look at it as saying, oh, Roberts is a threat to Ebron. I think it's very much the opposite.
All right. Next, they took Jamal Agnew, a corner that they view as a nickel. He'll be in the mix as a punt returner. He had a really good pro day. They sent some people out to his pro day. They also took Jeremiah Ledbetter, defensive lineman. They think he has versatility to play end or tackle. Again, if you've been listening to the show, it's a pretty common theme with this versatility of being able to play multiple positions. And then Bob Quinn was true to his strategy there, Josh, and took a quarterback, Brad Kaya. Why do you think they took Brad Kaya?
Quinn specifically said good arm strength, pocket passer, played in an NFL system, so that's definitely part of the evaluation. Less projection, in his opinion, because he's actually played under center, run some play action. And quite frankly, there are very few of those coming out every year when you talk about the modern college game, the spread offenses from shotgun 95, 100% of the time.
So a little bit lower risk with Kaya than you think?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. So I think they probably view him as a guy that can compete pretty quickly for that backup quarterback job behind Stafford. So the fact that they got him so late in the 7th round, that's great value for them. And also worth pointing out, Al Golden is on the coaching staff at Detroit. He's the one who recruited him at Miami. So interesting that they went and let him go and get one of his guys dating back to high school. So I think there's an expectation there that they could at least, again, when you talk about what Quinn said about drafting a quarterback every year being good business, I think they view that as worst case scenario. They're getting a guy that potentially has some trade value in a year or so.
And for the prospect's sake, for Kaya's sake, I have to think this is a really good situation, because he gets to go in and, it's a favorable situation, like you mentioned, with a coach he's already been with, and sort of an easier transition with the pro style system, and so yeah, I think this would be a good situation for him.
Yep, and also it's not like Orlovsky's gone finally, so it's not like Jag Rudock just has that backup position locked down. I would suspect Kaya will be the third guy this year, but I imagine 2018 he's going to have a chance at that backup quarterback job. And again, that's going to help his future, whether it's with the Lions, whether it's elsewhere. I think the Lions are going to be able to kind of create a market, create some capital with him if he progresses like they feel he can.
All right. Yeah. And then again, wrapping up the Lions, like I said, I think, that things are moving in the right direction there with the way that Bob Quinn is moving the Lions. All right. We are going to switch over to the AFC North now, to a team that you live. This is your closest team, Josh, the Cincinnati Bengals.
I drove by their stadium just a few hours ago. Yep.
Woohoo! It's a pretty little area there in downtown Cincy. For those of you who don't know, Pro Football Focus's our world headquarters are in Cincinnati, Ohio. Josh lives by there. A lot of our analysts live by there. So yeah, we get to drive by that Bengals stadium and we go into the office. Really pretty. Love that downtown Cincy area. Going inside the war room of the Bengals, Josh. This team operates very differently than a lot of other teams. And again, I've mentioned on here before, to me, because I'm a nerd, that's what's been sort of fascinating about this whole thing, is just seeing how all these different teams, structure themselves differently. And some teams, it's, as we mentioned, Bob Quinn did all the pressers for the Lions, and for the Bengals, it was like the exact opposite. Like there wasn't a single personnel man at any of their draft pressers. It was all coaches. And so it was really like the exact opposite. I know, they historically have one of the smaller personnel departments, but they've been drafting some really good players lately. I know Duke Tobin is their personnel ace. He's a director of player personnel. But yeah, Josh, the coaches are really heavily involved in that process there in Cincinnati, don't you think?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point, but I think part of that goes back to the fact that their scouting staff is, well, it was pretty literally non-existent until the last couple of years. Now they have a couple guys in there, but they don't have a huge arsenal of scouts on the road all the time. So when All-Star season comes along, coaches get their first look. Not that that's the entire team's first look, but their opinions are going to weigh a little bit heavier, and they let that factor in a little bit more. I also think that kind of plays out into some other general parts of the strategy. Historically, Cincinnati's been one of the teams that's been willing to take risks on character guys, on injured guys. Mm-hmm. And this year was certainly no different. Them taking, we'll get into him, really the most controversial player with the biggest off-field issue. I don't think there's any question about that. They drafted him early on. So that's something, again, that I think is a bit of a byproduct of them not getting out there, maybe sometimes not getting all the information on these guys. Not that, it wasn't out there for Joe Mixon. Obviously, it was out there for the entire world to see. But sometimes they're viewed through other parts of the league as maybe they're a little bit of a step behind on that. Maybe don't have the full picture, thus they're willing to kind of take these guys a little bit earlier than the rest of the league is.
Yeah, but I do think they have been drafting some really good players, especially the last couple of years. And then
no question about that.
This year, Coach Lewis even mentioned, he said we were on the 112th pick, and there were 12 players picked that were outside the first 3 rounds of their board. So he said that basically that means that their evaluations were very much in line with the rest of the league. So even though they do have a smaller department and they are running heavily on the input of coaches, again, it's. To me, I think it's worked for them at least the last couple of years. Again, like I said, I think they've had some really talented draft classes, and this year was no exception. Last year we had heard some chatter that they really were interested in taking a fast wide receiver, that Will Fuller from Notre Dame, but he ended up getting drafted by the Texans, so they couldn't. So, this year I was not shocked at all when they went after John Ross, and there's it's pretty obvious why they took him. Just that pure speed, but he's also, just a really talented, route runner, and as far as, not wasting too many motions in and out of his breaks and things like that. But, there's a lot of areas where this guy can really, impress you other than just his speed, Josh, don't you think?
Yeah, there's no question about that. They talked about his ability to separate laterally in the red zone, which is a huge skill to be able to have, and that's something where corners will get up closer, playing press coverage, and he has a tremendous ability to go sideways, whether it's through slants or just general route running, because of his speed and explosiveness. He just gets that space so quickly, and I just think that's going to be a huge boon to them. He just seems like the perfect complement to AJ Green. AJ Green can do everything. There's no question about that.
Yeah. But
to put the Deshaun Jackson type opposite him, that can literally any play, whether it's a 9 ball, a little quick slant, or a screen, he can take it to the house any play, just because he's so explosive, so fast. I just think that's a perfect complement, because as a defense, you have to account for that guy. You can't just roll all the coverage to AJ Green right now. I look forward to seeing them stacking the two of them together on one side and see how defenses play that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, you have to think, A, it's going to create room for AJ Green, and then B, it's going to create room for whoever the running back is, right? Because if you have to honor that speed over the top, there's just going to be less guys down in the box. So, they're going to have better looks to run against. So, I think it's going to improve every element of their offense, basically. So, even though, again, John Ross may not be catching that pass, him running downfield and taking two defenders with him, may open up a hole for, their next pick that we're going to talk about here, and that's Joe Mixon, the running back who had some off the field issues, some character issues. They view him as a running back and a kick returner, so he has a lot of value. He's also value in the passing game as well. So they view they can move him around to different places on the field. Outside of the off the field stuff, Josh, what else do you think they liked about Mixon?
Yeah, I as a football player, I'm not sure what you don't like about him.
Yeah,
he's explosive athlete. He can run with power. He can run with speed. His ability as a receiver is outstanding. And I just, again, you go back to stacking on one side, those two receivers. And then all of a sudden you've got Mixon coming out, swinging behind him into the space that those two guys create. And I just think that's going to be death to defenses. Obviously, he's got to keep everything in order. He can't repeat the mistakes he's made in the past. If he's able to do that, I think that's such a great situation because Cincinnati has shown that they kind of understand the modern running back in terms of how to use them coming out of the backfield. They've done with Gio Bernard, and I don't think there's any comparison between the two of them on the field, Bernard and Mixon. Mixon is such a more dynamic athlete, but can at the same time can fill that same role in terms of being able to be the pass catching type, while still having the skills to run between the tackles as well. They have enough guys to where they're not going to have to try and lean on one of them to be a 3-down guy. So they're in a good situation in that backfield. But make no mistake about it, Mixon keeps his head right. He's going to get a lot of snaps, and he's going to be a very productive player for the Bengals.
It's really scary to think that one team added Ross and Mixon to the same offense, because that's just so much speed that you put on there and so much playmaking ability, game-breaking ability. So, that's an awesome 1-2 punch there for the Bengals. They moved to the defensive side of the ball next and took Jordan Willis from Kansas State, pass rusher, PFF favorite. We were very high on Jordan Willis. He graded very well in our system, very productive in college. It's one of the reasons why they took him, and not because he graded well in our system, but because he was very productive in college. And they also really liked his body lean. They felt his body lean, his bend, and his relentlessness. They said are NFL traits right away. But this is a really good pick, Josh. Why do you think that the Bengals decided to go with Willis here?
Yeah, well, they've got some issues in terms of being able to rush the passer, and we'll talk about their next pick in a little bit and how they kind of double dipped on the edge presence. But Willis is obviously a huge PFF favorite, just graded completely off the charts for us. But they love his fundamentals, his hand placement, his technique as a rusher. They like the fact that they think he's a student of the game. He really studies the tackles and how to attack each guys to exploit weaknesses.
Which makes sense with that amount of production that he had.
Oh, there's no question about that. Now, he probably didn't have to do too much studying considering he was against Big 12 talent. But that aside, bringing in that kind of mentality, the kind of skill set he has with his hands, he's going to be able to translate very quickly and be able to play immediately. Michael Johnson has, let's face it, he has not been good for the Bengals in recent years. They really need to get a guy in there full-time as a replacement. And Willis is at least part-time on pass rush, is going to be able to do that this year. I think by the beginning of next year at the latest, he's going to be at that full-time end for them. So I think it was a great pick, a tremendous value for the Bengals there.
Yeah, then they double dipped on pass rushers with their next pick in Carl Lawson, a player that we think was probably only there because of concerns about injuries during college. But he could be a pass rush specialist like day one. This guy, I mean, he's a guy that Josh, you and I have been talking about for years. Ever since I had to scout him, I had to scout Auburn some stuff when he was a freshman, and I was just like, oh man, this Lawson kid could really bend the edge, and we've liked him ever since. And I mean, again, stylistically, I think different than Willis. How do you see Lawson being a compliment to and sort of used differently than Willis by them?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that you can see him kind of playing off the ball a little bit as a linebacker as well. They've been a very traditional 43 team, and they've used their linebackers as such in a more traditional manner than most teams. And quite frankly, they haven't gotten great production out of that core the last couple of years either. So it'll be interesting to see how much time he splits back there. If he ends up being on rundowns off the ball, and then they put him on the edge to rush the passer, I'll be interested to see how his splits work out this year. But I think he's kind of the first guy that's going to be able to do that for them. They really don't have that guy in their roster right now. Am I missing anybody, Jordan? I just don't see them having a guy that can really fill both roles for them like Lawson's capable of doing.
I've been really high on Lawson, and so full disclosure, I still am. So again, I don't really know how many people that they have that sort of bend. That he has outside from just from a pure pass rush, outside speed rush ability. Yeah, I think that he probably has better ability like that than than people on the roster there. So I agree, Josh. I think it's a great pick for them. Again, just Lawson as a player is a great pick for them. It'll be one of the steals of the draft, I think, as far as where they took him. Mm-hmm. But then again, to pair him with the stylistically different Jordan Willis, that's scary because those guys, who knows, they could end up being bookend, defensive ends, for them. But again, Lawson offers them some off the ball versatility too if they need to. The next player they took, Josh Malone, wide receiver. I think they basically, again, a big catch radius. That sort of thing. I don't know how much field he's going to see with the talented wide receiver group they're putting together there. And then they went to Michigan. Josh, they took a Michigan guy. Tell us about it.
They did, and this isn't me being a Michigan man thing, but they've had issues at defensive tackle opposite their stud Geno Atkins. D'Amato Pecco's production just hasn't been there the last few years. That's, you ask anybody at PFF, and that's been a point of contention with that roster in Cincinnati. And I just think Glasgow's a tremendous value here. Not super explosive or flashy guy, but he's a strong kid. He's a technician. He can get off blocks. He can rush the passer from the interior as well as hold up against the run. I just think he can do everything well, maybe not at an elite level, but he's just a guy that's going to get a lot of solid, dependable reps from them, and that's exactly what they're looking for opposite Geno Atkins. Just, again, something they haven't had from D'Amato Pecco the last couple of years. So I think that was just a really, really good, smart pickup for them.
Next, they took a kicker not named Zane Gonzalez, which was really weird to all of us. So they took Jake Elliott. Now they've said that they I think Zane Gonzalez was in the running for this pick as well, and they had mentioned that Zane, and that they thought he was a really talented player. But they said what sort of differentiated Jake from Zane was Jake's ability to kick deep on kickoffs. So that's sort of why they decided to go that route.
Yeah, and I think that's a particularly interesting point when you look at that division and the weather they're playing at in Thursday, in November and December. You're going to get that wind. You're going to get that cold. It's a little bit harder to kick off. And then you got those returners coming at you all of a sudden because you can't kick it as deep as you could in September. So I think that's an interesting point for them, kind of like, we talk about the quarterbacks in those cold weather cities. or ones that have heavy winds, you need that guy that can make the difficult throw in bad weather. And Elliott, I think they see obviously from the quotes as the guy that can make that deep kickoff in bad weather as well to help start out drives correctly on defense.
Next, they took a bad weather offensive lineman in Utah's J.J. Dielman. He is related to Chris, by the way, but J.J. is a player that he played, tackle, I think initially, then they moved him inside at Utah. So he was a guy who could play both inside and out. I believe the Bengals are sort of viewing him as being an interior offensive lineman, but, a leader, big, tough, physical, smart. There was what we've talked about it before on here. There was 4 of the Utah offensive linemen were drafted, and there were 19 NFL offensive line coaches at their pro day. So just again, one of those programs that can produce or still produces NFL caliber linemen on a regular basis. So they liked him, snagged him again. That versatility will come in handy. Next, they got Jordan Evans, a linebacker. Why do you think they took Jordan Evans, Josh? Other than his amazing first name.
Yeah, Jim Haslett talked about him being one of the better cover guys he's seen in a long time, which, let's be honest, it's a bit of hyperbole. But at the same time, again, you talk about what that linebacking core they have now, what they can do. They don't have that guy that's versatile to go off the back end in coverage. They just don't have a superior coverage guy in that backing core. So if at the very least you can do that to start with, that's going to be a huge help to them. Like his ability to run with tight ends, think he's a good zone defender, really understands coverages, and they like his hands as well, at least as a defender in the back end. He needs to get better in terms of being more physical. That's definitely an issue I saw when I scouted him in a run. But again, with what they have, he kind of fills a role that they currently aren't able to produce effectively with the current personnel.
Their next pick, they actually made a trade and traded up to get Brandon Wilson. And the reason I think why they traded up to get him is because of his versatility. he's a guy they view as someone who could play nickel, can play safety, could possibly play corner out wide, but. This guy he's played corner in college, nickel, safety, and running back. So he can play basically all these different positions, tested really well, really well for them. And so athletic profile and that versatility, I think, is why they went with Brandon Wilson, why they traded up for him. And then they finished up going up with Mason Shrek, which that's an awesome name, Josh. Shrek. Mason Shrek, tight end. I hope he has a long, prosperous career in the NFL for all of our sakes. Again, just sort of a physical, all-around tight end, and you don't really see too many of those guys right now. We'll be talking about the tight end soon, Josh. Soon.
Yeah. We certainly will.
It would be a great opportunity for me to re-mention my guy, Dallas Goedert, which I should probably just do that every show. All right, so that will wrap up the Inside the War Room for the Cincinnati Bengals, and that will wrap up the 2017 draft for us, Josh, which means, Josh, I think it's time for the draft time machine, Josh. All right, Josh. We are sick and twisted, and I don't know if we should offer a preemptive apology or.
I will preemptively say this was completely Jordan's idea.
I don't know if that's
not
true.
Mine.
I don't know if that's
true.
I'm not sure.
The main team
not
involved. Sure. I apologize for my partner.
I'm not sure this is how
he knows not what he does.
I'm not sure that's how I remember it, Josh. But anyways, so this might ruffle a few feathers. Please don't get mad at Josh for this terrible idea. So what we've done is we've taken the draft time machine, Josh. I'm going to take it to the year 2010. Now, Josh, what I'm going to do, since I'm in Radio City Music Hall, Josh, and I have the card for the pick 194 in the 2010 draft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Josh, with one pick by simply changing one pick, Josh, I think I can disrupt the balance of power within a division.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen here.
So what I am going to do is the Baltimore Ravens at pick 194, the 2010 draft, are going to select wide receiver Antonio Brown. So
man,
that's one pick before the Steelers were going to pick him, Josh. So Antonio Brown went at pick 195, but I have now just taken him at pick 194 to the Ravens. Josh, what did I just do to the AFC North?
Yeah, I think you kind of flipped the balance of power on its head as you suggested it would do. Ravens took Ramon Harewood from Morehouse, the offensive tackle. Didn't quite pan out for them. And then obviously the Steelers, very next pick, division rivals going back to back. And for that matter, pick number 191, the Bengals took a wide receiver. They took Desmond Briscoe 191, but for our purposes, we're going to send him to Baltimore. Boy, I don't think it can be understated the impact and the importance Antonio Brown has to that offense. Obviously, they have a quarterback capable of doing just about anything on the field. But that being said, Antonio Brown is consistently the last 3-4 years the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in the entire league. And that offense is just a completely different story without him. Ben Roethlisberger is a different quarterback without him. You think about what Pittsburgh has accomplished in that time period.
They haven't had a losing record since they drafted him, Josh.
No, they haven't had a losing record. I don't think if you look at that roster as a whole, Jordan, I don't think it's nearly as talented as they've been able to produce. And I think it's because of guys like Brown that they've been able to do things like go to the AFC Championship game last year. Without him, they're certainly not doing that. They're getting at least 1 or 2 losing records, in my opinion. And then you look at how it affects the other teams as well, Jordan. Baltimore. Well,
I mean, we just
what
fixed
does it do
one of
for
their
them?
big weaknesses, right? Doesn't that just patch up with their biggest weakness?
Oh, no question it does that. And not only does it patch that up, but how does that help them structure the rest of their roster? 2015, Baltimore took, with the 26th overall pick, they took Brashad Perriman, who barely has been on the field in 2 years and certainly hasn't looked anything worthy of where they picked him so far. Now, obviously, he's young. He's got time to develop. Maybe he's got a full year of play. He'll get better. But, I mean, he certainly hasn't lived up to that. What if they didn't have to take him there? You look at some of the guys at different positions that were available immediately after. Byron Jones went to Dallas with the very next pick. Landon Collins went 33rd overall. Positions that Baltimore needs in that secondary. You put one of those guys on there and Antonio Brown, that's a very different looking division there.
Yeah, I have to think again with just taking this one player, just one pick before, we're really messing with the balance of power in that division. Like I said, I think we're really making Baltimore significantly stronger in their roster in multiple areas, like you mentioned, and then significantly weakening the Steelers. Division politics, zero sum, Josh. So, if you strengthen yourself, the other teams get weaker. That's again, I think that would be quite a chaotic pick, to happen to that division.
Yeah, and I also think it's worth pointing out Cincinnati, how they possibly benefit from that deal. Now, I don't think it would be as simple as Baltimore, Pittsburgh just flip-flopping, but Cincinnati's won some divisions, hasn't won a playoff game in that time period, and they've lost a couple to Pittsburgh. I venture to say that if that deal goes on, I don't think it would just be, well, Baltimore takes over that division. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl in that time period, but I think in general they've been arguably the third best team in that division at that time, and Cincinnati has been right there the whole time. I venture to say Cincinnati has at maybe the same number of division titles, maybe another one, probably have at least a playoff win finally. in that regime, which would be the first of theirs. Even though they've made several times, they've even won a division a couple times. I think that benefits them as well. So that's a really intriguing move to think about what would happen if that were the case.
Yeah, seriously. And I can't believe that you were so twisted that you would want to do that to Steelers fans, that you would come up with that terrible idea.
I called it. It was totally your idea.
Bad human, Josh.
Yes.
All right, and now that we have enraged Steelers fans and upset the balance of power in the AFC North, we are going to sign off for this episode of Drafts with Jordan and Josh. Again, please sign up for DraftKings and FanDuel, make that $10 deposit, and get your free PFF Edge subscription, or leave us a 5-star rating and review with your email or Twitter handle in it, and that's way you could also win the PFF Edge subscription and a PFF Elite subscription, or you could also just go to Pro Football Focus and subscribe to either one of those. All right, Josh, we are out of here, buddy. You got anything to say on the way out?
Now's the time to do all that. With preseason gearing up, fantasy season starting, you got to do all your prep work ahead of time.
We're here.
Subscribe.
Here. It's getting here. Like I said,
we're here for you.
We can smell the odor of the non-congealing paint already, Josh. It's upon us.
It smells delicious.
But Paul is upon us.